Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call it when your friend with a four-letter name with two consonants and two vowels that starts with an A oversleeps his alarm? Or rather, what do you say? Not what do you call it, what do you say?
I don't know. What do you say?
Alan Wake! Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I think my tactic should just be to really lean into I don't know what I'm saying at the beginning. It's the only thing that ever makes you laugh is when I'm just like, what you say?
I love laughing at your mistakes. What can I say?
Oh, well, listeners, I'm a writer, host Madelyn. Sort of, I'm not even really a writer.
I'm your AI dog host, Emma.
Hey, and welcome to the show. This week, you probably didn't guess it from the joke, we're going to be talking about Alan Wake, and we're going to be talking about Cloudpunk. So despite Alan Wake having a remaster that came out like just this month, right? It is not the new game, Alan Wake OG.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it is impossible to find anything on the internet about OG Alan Wake now. Google Alan Wake, it is the remaster. Pages.
What do you mean? There's retrospectives for like every year from like 5 to 10.
You're absolutely right. I just mean to say that if I just search Alan Wake, everything is like, the remaster.
To be fair, because it's a remaster, it's pretty similar. It's just Alan Wake with better skin texture, basically. So
Alan Wake, who's taken some proactive. You're absolutely right. His skin is clear from that Pacific Northwest air.
And our new game?
Like I said, it's Cloudpunk.
Did you say it?
I sure did.
I thought I could have sworn you stopped at Alan Wake.
Nope, your AI just malfunctioned.
Apparently.
So, shall we talk about Alan Wake, the writer?
Yeah. Do you remember that meme format that would go around that was like title when he titles? I don't know, I haven't played the game. For some reason, whenever I look at Alan Wake, all I can think is like Alan when he wakes. I don't know, I haven't played the game. Just wanted to put that out there.
But Emma has played the game.
Yes, I've played probably as much as I'm gonna play of it, honestly.
Oof.
It's not. I want to emphasize it's nothing to do with the game. I'm really enjoying the game. I'm not good at it. And I don't have the constitution to keep trying at it when I'm not good at it. I got stuck on the last, boss of episode 2. I tried it, 6 times. I can't do it. I would have to reset the chapter.
Even with haptic feedback?
What?
Even with haptic feedback?
Shockingly, haptic feedback does not make Alan able to run.
Oh, that I did read about a lot. Yes, Alan Wake who can run 5 seconds before he runs out of breath.
Alan Wake is wearing 4 or 5 layers of clothing and can tank a couple of axes thrown in his chest. So we should give him a break about not being able to run.
You're right.
For more than 5 seconds.
You have to think about it as he has several serious chest wounds. And that's why he can't run. Not that he couldn't. Yeah. The man is fit. He fits in some workouts between his bouts of writer's block, no doubt. But you're absolutely right. He has some injuries that he's tending to.
But yeah, basically it's that I'm a wimp and I panic a lot. And so it makes things that I probably could do if I wasn't scared impossible. And I wish I could play more of it, but I'll probably just go watch someone else play it to finally satisfy my curiosity on everything. Because it's just, I'm not good at, even a little bit of horror, apparently.
Well, it's good for Halloween month here, I guess. Spooky, scary
The Last of
Alan
Us is
Wake.
as far as I can go into horror, apparently.
Apparently. So, Alan Wake, if you're not familiar, is an action-adventure game. That's it. That's all you get. No, I'm just kidding.
His name's Alan Wake, and he's a writer.
which is apparently something he says a lot. Emma texted to me.
I don't know. It's just
at
at the end of all the trailers I saw of it. And now it's because he has such a distinct way of speaking that it really sticks in your head.
I gotta finish introducing the game before I jump into my tangent about writers writing about writers. But Alan Wake from Remedy Entertainment, originally an Xbox 360 exclusive. They came out in 2010. They then released a PC version in 2012. And then just this past month, us PlayStation faithful finally got a chance to play the game because the remaster came out for all kind of non-Switch modern platforms, including haptic trigger feedback on the PS5, which I just feel like I have to shout out every time because the haptic feedback is kind of fun to say.
Using the flashlight feels really good in the haptic feedback area, I will say.
The haptic flashlight gets 2 thumbs up from Emma.
Anyway, Alan is suffering from a writer. He's suffering from writer's block.
So can he really call himself a writer? Are you a writer when you're not writing?
Well, he's written like 5 books before this, so yeah, I guess so. But like he finished his last book and then he hasn't been able to write. So his wife decides to bring him on like a vacation trip to relax, but it's actually really a trick to try to help him get writing by like giving him a new environment and like taking him away from things or whatever. So they end up in this cabin after Alan's like, yeah, I'll take these keys from this lady in black with a veil over her face. That seems good. And they go to the cabin, and then in the middle of the night, Alan wakes up, and his wife has been pulled. Alan wakes up, and his wife has been pulled into the ocean, and when Alan dives in after her, Alan then wakes up again in a crashed car with no idea of how he got there, apparently missing a week of time since they arrived in
I think you mean
Bright
a wake
Falls.
of time.
A wake of time? That's not a real thing.
It sounds kind of like week. Anyway, go on.
Okay. That's the summary. But also he finds in the night that there are these strange monsters, or rather humans who have been sort of possessed and are now coming after him with axes and knives, who can only be defeated through the use of light and his handy-dandy revolver.
I feel like I've discovered a new way for me to die in a horror game, which is like I'm listening to you talk about, oh yeah, like Alan's a writer who's having a hard time and his partner decides to trick him into writing by taking him on a vacation. And I'm like, huh, interesting. That doesn't sound like something I would ever do in my life with the dissertation writing person that I live with. Too bad that I'm gonna get sucked into the philosophy paper he forgot that he wrote. Isn't that gonna be fun for me? I'm gonna have to solve thought experiments.
I made it's not, like, mean. Like, Alan gets mad about it, but really all she does is, like, I brought a typewriter just in case you want to sit here and work.
But that's exactly the kind of passive-aggressive BS that I would also pull. So I'm just saying that, like, I see myself being dragged into the ocean and then forced to, I don't know, battle Socrates.
Mm-hmm. Darkness-possessed Socrates.
Look, I think Alan Wake 2, Remedy, I'm handing this to you. It doesn't have to be about Alan Wake. It can be about me.
Exactly.
But yeah, and then the rest of the game is just him talking to himself and battling creatures in the darkness, right?
Yes. So what starts to happen is he starts to find, like, manuscript pages all over the place at night. And they appear to have been written by him, Alan Wake. But it's about things that he doesn't remember writing it, and also a lot of these pages start coming true, actually, on his nights out in Bright Falls. And other people notice this as well. So that becomes, like, a big sticking point, in addition to his, continually missing wife. Also, his editor Barry is there, and he's great. So
editors are always a good character in writer stories. True. I think gotta have an editor. Mm-hmm. So various questions for you as someone who's played the game. Do you believe that Remedy was able to actually write Alan as sort of a bad, overwrought writer, or do you think that they are just kind of bad, overwrought writers writing this game, and you could just read it generously?
I mean, I know that they are good writers, so I've played Control. To be fair, that's, down the line.
Yeah.
But, no, I think it's rather purposefully. Alan has a very distinct voice. That is his, and that's what good writing is, I guess.
Just saw some reviews that were like, oh, I don't know, it's just kind of bad. And so I was curious about your take as someone who's now actually played some of the game. But that's good. Appreciate that. Fine line to walk, of course.
It helps that Alan's, a little bit insufferable,
sure.
Generally. So, all of his characterization is consistent, I think, is the thing. And that's what defines it. That's what makes it stick out to me as good writing, whereas bad writing, I feel like, generally, or at least non-purposeful writing, generally has to do with inconsistency in character, whereas Alan just is like that, so...
Is that a ringing endorsement, is the other question.
I really enjoyed it. I really wish I could keep playing it, but it just... Maybe someday I will be a good gamer, and I can, do good game things. But I was playing it, I guess yesterday. The first time I played it and was scared, my dog didn't care because she was asleep. But this time she was it was during the day, and I was going, ah, ah, and she was looking at me.
All good?
So clearly this game is not something I can do.
Well, I'll tell you why I opted to play Cloudpunk. And it was partially because I knew you were playing this, and it might be more interesting for us to have played both games together. But also, every single review for Alan Wake goes out of its way to be like, it's like Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks. Have you seen David Lynch's Twin Peaks? It's like that. Twin Peaks. And as someone who has bounced off of Twin Peaks 3 times, granted, it's been a long time since I've given it a shot. Maybe now that I'm an adult, Twin Peaks will work for me. But I just... Deadly Premonition gets described that way too, right? I realize that these are, in some ways, have similar tones, I think, but in other more meaningful ways are not at all similar games. Except that maybe that the walking around is kind of a pain. But whenever I see a game described as Twin Peaks, I know that that's meant to be a selling point because people love Twin Peaks, and I just am always I don't know, this sounded interesting, but I just don't like that vibe.
Yeah, I feel like it's less overtly weird than Twin Peaks. One of the first scenes is you going into a diner, and it's a small town diner, so it has that Twin Peaks aesthetic, and there are some colorful characters in there, but that's the waitress is very normal. I was the people were talking about the waitress as the Twin Peaks waitress, and she looks like that, but she just excited to see an author that she likes, and Alan's kind of a jerk about it. But fairly, he's on vacation, so it's fine. He can be a little annoyed. And there's the creepy lady that gives him the keys and stuff, but it's less specifically Twin Peaksy, and more it's small town America, and that has a certain aesthetic, at least in film, and there is some weirdness to it, but it doesn't feel Lynchian, I guess, is what I would say.
The only other major media franchise I can think of that's set in the Pacific Northwest is Twilight. Does it feel Twilightian?
No, not really.
Rats.
I would not call it Twilightian either.
Too bad. Something that struck me about this game, can you think of any other games that are about writers?
No, not off the top of my head. There's probably some indie games.
Sure. I mean, can you think of any other, I would consider Remedy like AA, right?
Yeah.
Any other AA or higher games that are about writers, or even prominent indies that are about writers?
Certainly not off the top of my head, but I'm bad at that game always, too. So
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure
you
weren't going to come back to me and be like, Madeline, you're an idiot. Here are 6 games that I thought of right away that are about writers. So now that I've established that I'm only going to say something perhaps moderately stupid, something that is a pet peeve of mine, frankly, in most other media, is like movies that are about people making movies, plays that are about theater people, like books that are about writers. Not to say that there aren't many of those things that I enjoy, right? But I often find it to be like, oh my god, like, you're just like navel gazing and writing this for like, you know, like all of you are like laughing in a circle at each other, right? Like the movie people laughing at the movie people pretending to be movie people. And so that's just something it often makes some me want to find, okay, like you have to work a little harder for me to be interested in this, right? And so it's interesting to me that not only can I not think of too many kind of generic writers that are like protagonists in games, but that there isn't yet a genre of games that's about people making games.
Well, there's like the game dev tycoon type ones. I think there's a lot of those, but not a lot of narrative ones that are about people making games. You're right.
Yeah. How long until we get there? How long does the industry have to exist before that happens?
I will say that Alan Wake is not...
I know it's not about him being a writer.
It's not that it's autobiographical, but it's certainly self-reflective from writer Sam Lake.
I know. That's too much for me.
He's not being subtle about it.
Yeah.
I haven't read enough to like speak authoritatively about that, but you can clearly tell that from the get-go.
Oh, but that's what I think is so interesting, right? Like, we don't see that it's remarkable when I see in a game, like, oh, you've written a story and it's, like, basically about you. Even though, I mean, Alan Wake is now an 11-year-old game, right? And even if we acknowledge that storytelling started with The Last of Us, it's been a while since I've thrown that one in. Like, you'd expect, as we have these, like, more and more and more games that are very narrative-driven, right? I don't expect... like Miyamoto to be like, yes, I was a plumber and so I'm going to create Super Mario, right? Or I was Donkey Kong. So like I get it, right? Before a certain point there's not that much space for people to make games that are self-consciously about themselves, but it's interesting to me that hasn't trickled in as writing becomes something that's more and more central, right?
Yeah, I think that's because a lot of big games have evolved to be director-centric, not necessarily writer-centric. And I think that Alan Wake is certainly a game that's writer-centric, not just because he's a writer, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's structured much more like a television show, literally, in that it's in episodes.
Fun fact! One of the original, they were thinking for a while, and I think Xbox nixed it on them, but they were thinking about releasing it weekly.
Wow!
Episodes.
That's wild.
Yeah, 2-hour gameplay increments over a series of 10 weeks via XBLA, each one airing at the same time each week. The article I read, which was Games Radar, the making of Alan Wake, was saying this was when Lost was really popular. So like the one of the big appointment TV viewing things. So I can see why, especially for something like Alan Wake that has that sort of tone-ish thing going on, why they might have been tempted by that. But they did not end up going that way in the end.
But see, this feels like the kind of game where not only could the game work in that episodic format that I just basically said I didn't think could work in that episode, that weekly format, but it also feels targeted at the kind of people who would dig that, which I feel like is something that we didn't talk about too much on that episode, is not only could this game presumably if you trimmed a little bit of the repetitive mowing down of baddies, which probably the game would have benefited from anyway, right? If you trimmed it down a little bit and then you did release it weekly, yeah, the kind of people who are like, Alan Wake is a masterpiece, it's a classic, like those sort of people would have been very into, I feel like, it coming out weekly.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Missed opportunity.
A few other fun facts from this article is that originally they were planning this as an open world game.
Right. It
like
was
a
developed for a
sandbox open
really
world.
long time, right? It was like 5 or 6 years.
And they eventually ended up pulling back from that because the story didn't work if the player had like too much freedom, because it ruined the pacing, basically.
That makes a lot of sense.
But apparently the open world engine gave them a lot more freedom to make the environments, which helped contribute to the atmosphere, because they could have like slightly more wide open spaces or thin spaces and create that sense of unease, as I can attest to when I'm like, where am I? I stepped into the trees and now I am gone.
Well, you're in the Verizon wireless woods.
Yeah. And one other thing is they were talking a little bit, Alan Wake also has, like, within it you can find Alan's manuscript pages lying around. There's a TV show called, like, Night Springs, I think, that's like a Twilight Zone type thing that you can find episodes of around in the environment. You can find radio broadcasts going on that you can listen to with different, like, interviews and people talking about what's happening. And there's a fictional band as well, who I haven't gotten to yet, but I know that there's a rather famous sequence where they're playing their music and you're fighting off the Taken with all their pyrotechnic equipment. So I think that's probably the most well-known part of Alan Wake. But I was reading this, and he was talking about Sam Lake was like, it's one story, but it's many stories at the same time. And then it offhandedly mentions, like, he counts House of Leaves among his favorite books. I was like, of course he does. Of course he does.
Man, I really liked House of Leaves, which I realize doesn't make sense. Like, I'm like, F Twin Peaks. And I realize that this is the same kind of Irv. But have you read House of Leaves?
Yes, I really like House of Leaves too, but it's also, like, I really like it, so no shade at this guy, but it's also such a basic, like, I'm cool book answer.
Oh, that's gonna hurt
deserves
my boyfriend
it, but it's
when
also,
he listens to
like,
this. That's
funny.
absolutely gonna be painful for him to hear, I think. It's so true, though. I would say I get more House of Leaves vibes from Control than I do this game.
Well, it's a house, you know?
I mean, literally, that's what I was trying to say. Yes, there's more vibes because it takes place in a house, and this does not.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how I read my media.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Alan Wake. It's kind of like Twilight because it's in the Pacific Northwest. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have thoughts? I guess this will be my last thing before we move to Cloudpunk, probably. Do you have thoughts on the Remedy extended universe?
I mean, it makes sense.
Like, sort of.
I mean, it's like, I mean, I have not played the Alan Wake DLC in Control, so maybe it adds to it. But my understanding is that, like, the events of Alan Wake are, like, an altered world event that the people in Control are studying. So it's just, like, by introducing the system of altered world events, they could just make a bunch of, like, supernatural type games, and they're tied together in, like, real world, but spooky.
I guess my question is, what's the point? Right?
It's
like,
fun.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. I did sit in the same room as Clickbait Boyfriend played Alan Wake DLC. Neither of us had played Alan Wake. So I was, like, trying to get him to be like, can you summarize Alan Wake for me? He's like, he's a writer, he has a wife, there's a lake.
Yeah, no, it's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Sure.
I guess that's a spoiler.
Nice. Too
Oops.
late now.
Out of context.
Bleep it out. Um, but yeah, like I won't say like it's certainly. I understand. I don't feel like it's too shoehorned in. Like, yeah, it fits the world, and you can certainly make a bunch of collected supernatural stories. But other than that being a nice marketing tie-in for the 10 million people who bought Control, what story point is that serving? Or other than just being like, well, people like Marvel. Whenever I see someone make like an extended universe, I just have to have the like the eye roll of like, oh my god, like when's Thor gonna show up? Kind of.
This feels less direct than the MCU though. I feel like it's basically just providing like a lore foundation for things to happen that they can then build off of to create like new stories, I think. Which I think is interesting. It's like an anthology more than a MCU. If that makes sense.
I just have a cynical response to good marketing ideas. And this is
Fair
absolutely enough. Like, this is a good marketing idea. Like, it's clever. Obviously, they like to make games that are kind of like this anyway. So, like, might as well do the Easter eggs that fans are going to love on Twitter. But
it is my understanding that they have not added anything to Alan Wake Remastered to like tie it in closer to Control.
Well, they took away the product placement.
Yes, they did.
So
that's probably for several reasons, to be fair.
Is the licensed music back?
It is, yeah. I got a nice Mr. Sandman at the end of episode 1.
Alan Wake is just like the greatest hits of Talk This side quests, right?
Mm-hmm.
When will I do a side quest that's games that sort of remind me of House of Leaves? Will that be my next topic?
Valid topic.
It'll just be me being like, The Sims. It takes place in a house. Uncharted. There are leaves. Animal Crossing. There is a house and leaves.
True.
Well, I wait for Alan Wake 2 to come out, or the television show to get made, or the next Alan Sleep to come out. Let's talk about our new game, Cloudpunk.
Yeah. Cloudpunk is an adventure game developed by Ion Lands and published by Maple Whispering Limited. First for Microsoft Windows in April of 2020, and then for consoles in October of 2020. I think we played a little bit of this, actually, at the last PAX we went to.
We did!
Yeah.
Oh!
I remember the AI dog.
I remember it not being very good. And now here I am playing it for real. Oh man, this is flooding back to me now. I had not remembered that we played this at Corona PAX.
Yeah.
So Cloudpunk is the game that I am playing from this week's set of games. I played about the first hour or so. It's like probably only like a 10-hour game or something like that, right? I'm enjoying it more than I remember enjoying the demo, now that you've reminded me of the demo.
I thought it's just a weird game to play at a convention, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's like we tried those other adventure games too, and it's just hard to get a sense of them when you're just like, there's like thousands of other games around me that would let me punch things or something. So.
Exactly.
Want to get in line at Fall Guys.
Oh, Fall Guys. How long until their entirely inappropriate Squid Game crossover?
It's inevitable, I think.
Great. Anyway, in Cloudpunk, you play as illegal DoorDasher Rania. And you're working for Cloudpunk, which is an illegal delivery service in the big city of Nivalis. So your job... What?
I was just going to say Wikipedia calls it semi-legal.
Well, Wikipedia would say that, wouldn't they? Anarchists at Wikipedia. Gotta have rules, wiki people. Anyway, you drive your flying car, they're called hovas, through this, like, big city that's, like, real tall, as a flying car city would be, you'd imagine, and also real big. And you're making deliveries as assigned from your dispatcher Control, which is probably going to have to appear in the mashup, right? You can't have a dispatcher named Control with the Remedy Expanded Universe in play, so
True.
have to play with that. And you also, you set up your car automata, so basically you're like, you know, when you change the voice on your navigation system, it's more involved than that, but that's how I think about it. To be your dog, Camus, who you had to sell his body when you got evicted. And now you're trying to, you know, buy a new body for Camus so he can be a dog again and not a dog car.
Dog car is pretty cool, though.
It's a rough life, though.
Wow. Why don't you pull those crowd cheerers out at the beginning, you know?
Because you would call them crowd cheerers in the first 2 minutes of the episode, and that would be the end. That'd be it. So this game, you're basically you're doing a lot of driving from point A to point B, and delivering stuff, and occasionally delivering stuff that may or may not be super ethical. Also, it's a cyberpunk city, so you know that it came out in 2020.
Yeah.
Good. That's the break where Emma will put in, like, be like the cyberpunk disclaimer that, like, we will not talk about cyberpunk on this show.
Good.
We just left a little gap for you to have kind of your own, like, cyberpunk reaction there.
You really need to take a moment there to, like, move past it, right? Put it aside.
It is a tricky situation to be in as a developer. Like, on one hand, of course, any, like, cyberpunk is a genre and you can make cyberpunk games, and this one, the setting definitely works for the story that it's telling. But at the other hand, Cyberpunk 2077 was in development forever. And, like, did you want to wade into that by making your cyberpunk game? But now it's unavoidable. Every game that's cyberpunk for the next 5 years will have to be compared to Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes. Besides, it's a good opportunity because, you know, like, people who are very skeptical about, like, the AAA take on cyberpunk might be like, oh man, though, I like cyberpunk. Are there any games out there that aren't, you know, corporate labor abusing games out there? And they're like, let us introduce you to our robot dog car.
Look, again, I'm not to be, like, cynical marketing, right? But, like, obviously Cloudpunk probably got way more coverage than it would have gotten otherwise, given its proximity to, you know, when it was released, it was supposed to be released just a month before Cyberpunk came out.
Yeah.
And that obviously was not the case, but...
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do as an indie, right? That's just, like, it's hard to... You can't be, like, cynical about that. They're just, like, riding the cyberpunk wave.
Look, again, it's just my gut reaction to people that are good at marketing, right? I don't trust it. I'm bad at marketing, and so when I see people that have a good marketing idea, I go, oh, what's wrong with you? So,
to be fair, it was originally supposed to be released in 2019.
Well, but that's on brand as well.
Had a delay.
Isn't it? Keep riding the cyberpunk wave.
True.
Delay it as long as you have to. Anyway. So Cloudpunk got sort of mixed reviews, and in playing it, I can definitely see why. If you're in games for good voice acting, this might not be the game for you. It is not great. It's fine.
Yeah, it does make me wonder why they bothered in some ways.
Well, because you get a lot of people talking to you while you're driving, And
I
I
guess
could
that's
see
fair.
how reading and driving would be difficult.
That's fair.
Much in the same way as you shouldn't text and drive kids. Like, that would be, I think, the vibe of the game if you didn't have voice acting. But it really does just baffle me sometimes, because it's just like, God, like, how is it this flat? It just feels like you could get anybody in. Anyway, I don't know. Whatever.
I do think there's something that happens when you, like, hook someone up and stick them in front of a mic and, like, have people, like, watching them, though. You know?
I guess
that
so.
has, like, people that might have absolutely normal speaking voices start panicking a little bit.
It's not terrible. It doesn't ruin the game. I was a little worried after I read some reviews that it was going to be just, like, absolutely awful. It's mostly just that it's a little flat for some of the characters, and it feels like they could have done something that was, like, just not that, hopefully.
Well, they're all so crushed by their debt, right? Maybe it's commentary. They have no room to feel emotions or express them in their voice.
I feel like I've met plenty of people drowning in crushing debt who still speak like humans.
But it's for the narrative, Mel. It's the disconnect from reality to make your point, you know?
Look, I get it. You're right. You're right. And Alan Wake is a bad writer on purpose. Absolutely. Totally. The driving is fun. I've done a fair bit of crashing into things because I'm dumb. And I can't say that this game really did capture the anxiety of looking for a parking space that you feel when you're a driver, which I can't say is something that I was, like, wanting in a game. Like, I can't say that that was something that I experienced in life and I was like, you know what would make a good video game? Looking for parking.
Yeah.
But this, I mean, all the reviews, and I agree with this, the city is quite pretty. Supposedly it's even more beautiful on a computer, but we all know that I don't have a computer that can do that. So we are playing on the old PS4, baby. I'll throw the caveat out there, folks, that, again, I didn't play it on the Switch. I thought about it because I was like, oh, I can play it on the train, but I didn't, which is good because after the fact, I read that the Switch port is pretty bad.
Oof.
I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah, it was apparently, like, pretty bad. Had a bug that where it was like, sometimes you would just log into the game and you would have all the stuff, but the dialogue would loop back to the very beginning for some reason.
Weird.
But then you're stuck.
That's always the risk with Switch ports, I feel like, though.
Yeah, you just never know. Never
you
know
have to look it up. Yeah.
Which is a shame, because it feels like it'd be a fun game to play on Switch. But so it goes, I guess. Maybe the OLED model will do a better job.
There's really no difference in the OLED model besides the OLED.
Besides my faith in it.
It has your face in it?
My faith.
Your face?
My faith.
Your faith?
Yes. I believe it's more powerful.
Okay.
I can't believe you just said face to me twice.
I heard face both times. I don't know what to tell you.
It only has my face in it from the Miitopia demo. But there are people that really loved this game. Like, it was one of the New Yorker's top games of 2020. There are several reviewers out there that had it as, like, their top game of 2020. So if, like, cyberpunk stuff and, like, exploring a sort of, it's made with, it's voxels, right? Is the style. So it's this kind of, I don't even know how to describe this adequately, right? But it's not, like, photorealism or anything. But it is quite a pretty world, and it's interesting to explore. We all know that exploring games are not necessarily, like, my jam, and so I think this is the kind of game that I am mostly just going to, like, play through, right? I can't see myself spending that much extra time in the city, but we'll see. They seem really, I mean, speaking of extended universes, they seem really committed to continuing to develop for this world.
That seems good.
Well, it does seem like it's I wonder at what point they started planning these other releases. So they've released like basically a full-length DLC, which is just another episode with this same driver in the same city called City of Ghosts that came out this past May. And they've also announced that they're making a life sim that takes place in the city, because what says life sim like cyberpunk hellscape, right? Like, what do I want to, like...
I think that could be interesting, though, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's really, like, a life sim that's also kind of dystopian at the same time.
Animal Crossing. But yeah.
Well, yeah, Animal Crossing, you're right.
You've only just been given the ability to cook.
You're right. You were starving before this, living off fruit. And nothing but fruit.
But you're right. Nothing is blatantly dystopian. So it's an interesting idea. And, you know, I'm always intrigued by games that reuse their assets for creative reasons.
Yeah, I like cities that recur in games. So that's good. That's up my alley. But yeah, what really stood out to me about this game, I think when I was looking at it, was like there's a lot of reviews that are like, there's nothing really beneath the surface here, or, you know, the story doesn't have enough depth to it. And then I see a bunch of stuff that's like really into like the themes and messaging of this game. So it's interesting to see like the disparity of who picked up things from it and who didn't, which I think it's always valuable to look at games like that. To figure out what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, it's interesting that this week I feel like we have two games that are quite polarizing, right? In terms of their critical reaction. Alan Wake in some ways less so. I feel like I'm seeing more polarization for Alan Wake in the reviews of the remaster than it received at the time. Mm-hmm. But it'll be interesting to me to see, you know, this got good enough reviews and probably got a decent player base from people who were interested in cyberpunk games that weren't cyberpunk. And it is certainly... It's just interesting to me that they so quickly seemingly latched on to the thing that I feel like was consistently praised in the reviews, right? Even the reviews that were like, the story's kind of weak, there's not much under the surface. Pretty much the consistent praise point for this game was the city is really cool looking, like... For some the reviews that like really loved it are like, oh, there's so much to explore, like so many interesting people, right? But even the ones that didn't were like, oh, I wish there was more here, right? And so I do wonder, you know, did they decide to start developing this life sim just based on the fact that that's what everybody wanted, or was it something that was already in the pipeline?
I imagine it probably has a little bit to do with like, I mean, the city probably took them the longest to make in this game. With how its expansiveness and just the artwork in general. So that probably also comes into it. So it's convenient that everybody really liked the city, because I imagine that that's where a lot of time went developing the game. And I think it's good as I've, you know, with the RGG games that keep reusing the cities that they've already made, but like slightly different. I really like that. So I feel like games should just make good environments that are fun to go around with, and then just keep using that environment over and over again. I think it would cut down on workload. Well, but and still make good games.
It does front load the work though, doesn't it?
That's true.
Which is sort of interesting to think about, right? Like I don't know very much about how RGG developed like the Yakuza's pre anyone in the West caring about them, right? But it's especially interesting because it's like, oh, it started on PS2 and now they've brought that world to like PS5, right? And here it does feel like, you know, putting in all that effort up front for a game that's on PC and a game that is already kind of not meant to be in a realistic style is probably worth it if you're going to create a bunch of different games in that world. because you don't have to worry about it going graphically obsolete. Or like enginely obsolete. Like, yeah, I can't imagine being like, oh, I have to take Kamurocho and like it's gonna move from PS2 to PS3. Like that sounds like it must have been horrifying. I mean, I don't know. Not that I know very much about that, but
I don't even really know how that works, to be honest. So
I would suspect it was probably less reusing assets than anyone would want it to be, I guess, is
Fair.
my totally uneducated guess. But here it's like, oh no, that just feels really smart, right? Like, you built a world that everyone thinks is interesting. Great, make 6 games in that world. Might as well. I know that what I was craving from this, like, driving around sim is a fishing minigame. And I'm gonna get that.
Yeah. Every game's required to have a fishing minigame now.
It's true. Do you think we are just going to continue to see more and more and more games that are about delivering things?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Maybe. I don't know. I've heard that the director's cut of Death Stranding, like, opens up a lot more, like, combat stuff in contrast to the delivery stuff.
That's interesting.
So,
is that what anyone wanted from Death Stranding? I mean, I guess it's what Kojima wanted, given that it's the director's cut, but
I wasn't there when they were like, you can fight these people. I was like, when I was playing Death Stranding, I went out of my way to totally avoid those people. Because I I just wanted to do my deliveries, thank you. But apparently people wanted it, I don't know.
I mean, it's obvious where that storytelling is coming from, right? And not to say, like, neither of these games came out at a time where you can say, oh, they were influenced by the fact that it was the pandemic and suddenly everything is delivering and the supply chain issues now and yada yada. But, obviously, deliveries and big dystopian companies making deliveries and exploited delivery people are an omnipresent facet of our society. And
just the gig economy in general, right? Of people, Uber driving or doing all of those types of jobs. So that is certainly something that was around for longer than the pandemic.
Certainly. I wasn't trying to say the pandemic invented delivery.
Yes, I know. I know you weren't. Don't worry.
But it'll be interesting to me to see if that becomes something that's a real trend, or if I'm just like being like, oh, 2 games released where that's the mechanic. Like, it's everywhere.
I wouldn't mind more games like that. Death Stranding's deliveries are so fun. So
that's a hot take.
I really walking in that game was very good. Anything that wasn't walking sucked.
This game is the reverse. Like, driving, awesome. Walking, not good.
I guess his bike was pretty cool too, so that's fair. Just like the traversal was really fun. I think more games should think about traversal, basically. Going from one place to the other and really making that like an essential part of their game. Because that's what you do so much in games, and a lot of it is just like running through pretty places. It's like, I guess this is okay.
Unfortunately, both of these games are inconsistent in that. Our mashup game this time is going to be like some unpleasant walking. That's the game. Unpleasant walking simulator.
We did it. Thanks, folks.
No. The obvious mashup, it has to be about like a sci-fi writer or like a sci-fi game creator. Like, you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know what you're gonna do there, but it's like a sci-fi writer in a sci-fi world.
That's interesting, actually.
Is it? That's good. I'm glad you're seeing something interesting there. I definitely.
Well, it's like making the writer think like 2 steps ahead of things. Like, how do you write about a sci-fi writer who already lives in the world that we consider a sci-fi?
Right? That's true.
Like, what do they write about?
That's a great question, and it's one we should probably come up with an answer to Yeah, I know. What's beyond cyberpunk?
I don't know.
They probably write about like a utilitarian, like a utopian agrarian society. They're like, we'll tear it all down and we'll plant some wheat. They probably read about Animal Crossing, to be honest. That's a pretty bad game, though. Not Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing is a fine game, but I can't have my mashup be like, the developers of Animal Crossing make Animal Crossing in a sci-fi world.
This is reminding me like of Stardew Valley a little bit, of like he like leaves his job to go out to farm, you know, like reject capitalism, become farmer, basically.
A farm punk game.
Yeah. Yeah, so like a sci-fi writer living in this cyberpunk world goes out to the cyberpunk country. That would be fun to imagine.
Yeah, that's
right?
true. We don't see too much of that, do we?
Yeah. To get back in touch with nature and sort of inspiring him for his next story, because he's hit a wall on his inspiration. Mm-hmm. And then strange things start happening, I guess.
What's the gameplay?
Maybe he delivers things between people.
Sure.
Maybe,
yeah.
like,
he
there's,
went out
like...
with the intention to be a farmer, but, like, you can't just buy a farm. He's a writer. What money does he have? So instead, he ends up moving to the... But in the country, right, there's not the omnipresent transportation systems and flying cars that you have in the cyberpunk city. So, yeah, he has to be, like, the delivery guy.
Yeah, so he starts working, like, gigs, but in the country, basically. Right. So you might do deliveries, but then we could throw in like other little things if he gets like hired at a day to help with something or other, for example. Mm-hmm. That seems like a good setup, but I'm not sure what the story is. Like, you could make that's enough to make a game, but it feels like there has to be something weirdness in there to make it a little bit more Alan Wakey, I guess. Yeah,
let me think. I just want all the mini games. It's like, it's WarioWare, but that's not.
It's WarioWare. That's not quite the right tone.
It's definitely not.
But yeah, like micro games is fine. Yeah, like it's made up of a couple of different mini games, basically.
Yeah. While he's out there, he discovers that all of these people's life forces are being used to mine blockchain.
Oh my god. I think that's no. Gonna go no. Okay. That one. Too far.
But like something...
Too specific, I think, maybe.
Something kind of body horror-y like that, though, probably.
Sure,
right? Like,
yeah.
Like, all these people lay in bed at night, and while they sleep, like, their organs are harvested. Like, that's too extreme, but like...
I think it has to be maybe a little bit, like, less... like, non-specific, I guess.
You're absolutely right.
Not like they take their kidneys while they sleep. It's like they take their life energy, you know, or whatever.
It's like all these people are farmers, but where's the farm? What are they farming? And what they're farming is humans.
Well, okay, so that's the question of do we want these farm people to be bad? Or do we want them to be also exploited, despite
No, I think they're
being...
mostly exploited, with the exception of the Colonel Sanders type at the top.
Okay. That makes sense.
It's a cyberpunk story, so we gotta have the, exploited proletariat.
Yeah, exactly.
And the sci-fi writer's name is Karl Marx. Carl,
that's revealed at the end.
C-A-R-L Marx.
It's like a drop.
M-A-R-K-S.
I never got your name.
Marx.
It's Karl
Marx. And he's a time traveler. It is Karl Marx. That's the twist.
I think we've lost the thread a little bit. But we have a pretty decent base there that we could, springboard more ideas off of.
You're absolutely right. And then we spin it off, talk about other famous communists. Good extended universe here. Well, folks, have you played Alan Wake either when it came out in 2010 or recently, and what was your response to it? Do you wish there were more video games about people making video games or people writing games or writing in general? Have you ever worked as a soul-crushing, quasi-legal delivery job or installed your dog's voice to be your Google Maps navigator?
I wish I could.
It would just go ruff, ruff, ruff.
Ruff, ruff, ruff.
And you'd be like, oh, right, turn left. Well, if any of those things apply to you or you have other thoughts about the episode, you should hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat Emma's about to pull our next topics from, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. Last but not least, perhaps most importantly, if you want to keep having us in your ears in our increasingly cyberpunk future, or to just listen to when you're experiencing your own bouts of writer's block instead of visiting the Twilight Kids in the Pacific Northwest, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcast Online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, basically anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Is next week really our 6 weeks episode? Is that real?
Yeah.
Oi! I gotta finish some games.
Everyone look forward to my 2-hour rant on Lost Judgment.
I'm gonna have to take my headphones out so you don't spoil me.
I'll be very careful not to spoil you. But I have some feelings about this game, and they're mostly not positive.
You'll say you'll not be withholding judgment from the game.
I will not. My judgment is not lost. It is very found on this game.
So look forward to that next week. And then in 2 weeks for our spooky Halloween episode, what are we going to be talking about?
We're going to be talking about, for our old game, Kane and Lynch.
Sure.
And our new game, which I'm afraid to give you a little bit because of what I've heard about it, is going to be Cozy Grove.
Oh, no. Oh, danger. Danger for me. Oh, and it's been a stressful month, too. I can just see myself disappearing into Cozy Grove.
So look forward to that if Madelyn manages to make it there.
For your spooky Halloween episode. Cozy Grove. What's this spooky
Oh yeah,
Halloween?
really, it's really spooky. Yeah.
Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. Emma, do you have a sign off?
This week, I hope that when you wake, it's in not a cyberpunk world.